County City Council for August 8th, 2022 is now in session. Roll call, please.
Council President, Mr. Arcaro,
Present.
Mr. Emery,
Here.
Mr. Goff,
Here.
Mr. Kozowski,
Here.
Mrs. Ledford. Here. Mr. Moiseo,
Here.
Mr. Prokowski,
Present.
City Manager, Mr. Hockaday.
Here.
Finance Director, Mr. Williams.
Here.
Law Director, Mr. Lewis.
Here.
Please stand for the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance
to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Oh, sorry.
Okay, we have two sets of meeting minutes to approve. And we'll begin with July 11th, 2022. Are there any alterations or corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion?
So moved.
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford.
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Abstain.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, meeting minutes for July 11th, 2022 are approved. And we now have the meeting minutes for July 25th, 2022. Any alterations or corrections? Hearing none, is there a motion?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Arcaro.
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro.
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Abstain.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford.
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, the meeting minutes for July 25th, 2022 are approved. Move into citizen comments. Good evening to our guests who would like to address City Council. Community participation is an important part of local government and is encouraged. Please be advised that City Council sessions are audio and video recorded. When your name is called, please step to the podium and state your name and address for the record. Please keep your comments to 5 minutes or less. No abusive or threatening language will be allowed. If you have a specific question, you will receive a follow-up answer from either council or the city manager, and there will be no public debate at this time. When you're finished with your comments, you're welcome to stay for the rest of the meeting. Thank you for your participation, and we'll have Susan Diamond.
A tall drink of water. How do I turn this on?
It's on.
It should
Oh,
be
okay, you can
You're
hear me.
okay.
Yeah, we can hear you. Go ahead.
Okay. I grew up here in Conneaut, Ohio. Spent a lot of my career in Columbus, where unfortunately I was very badly injured in 2007, developed a nerve disease behind it called complex regional pain syndrome, which most doctors refer to currently as a suicide disease, because under certain circumstances, the disease is so painful that a lot of patients will in fact commit suicide. I started the support system for Ohio patients like myself in '08. And in fact, members of mine over the years have committed suicide because they could not, after many interventions attempted, find enough pain relief to even want to exist. Well, in 2016, as all of you probably are aware of, the CDC developed guidelines for opioid handling, which created an MME for doctors to follow. Not a mandate, mind you, but guidelines, quote, guidelines. However, this became somehow evolved into mandates, which caused the severe chronic pain population to become tapered down on their medications or taken off, recently actually taken off, given our opioid crisis, which is real, in fact, real as never before. As we all know, we've got the stuff coming across Mexico, we've got fentanyl poisoning, we've got, you name it, we've got next door neighbors making whatever in their basements. It's serious. So we have that factor, narcotics, addictions. And then we have this factor over here of severe chronic pain and patients so badly undertreated or untreated or undertreated that they are taking their lives. No, this is not funny, but I'm going to tell you anyways. I've been interviewing everybody prior to this and to an event I'm about to tell you about that's coming up in 20 days. I interviewed a veterinarian and asked her, why are you giving my terribly ill and very painful, about to die kitty cat gabapentin when he could potentially live out the rest of his short life now in pain relief? And her answer actually was, because we're told to do this by some government sanction here, because the animal's owner might take the stuff, might take the animal's medication. I mean, that is the most ridiculous thing I ever heard. So this is what we're up against right now in our community. We have the addicted community and we have the chronic pain community. So this is what I've done. And I've been an advocate since I got hurt and developed this awful disease myself. I've watched people die because of this dilemma. So I picked Ashtabula County for this event that I'm going to be doing August 27th, because we have such a high, incredibly high narcotic usage rate here. Not so much kids trying to get in their grandma's cabinets to get their pain pills or whatever, but you know, the serious stuff. And what we're doing is I'm bringing in the experts. I'm not the expert. I'm bringing in the experts from all over to zoom in and talk to, sorry, I'm scared. Talk to hopefully our community, as many as we can fit in the Conneaut Legion at 1 o'clock on the 27th, about the need for legislation to stop this. And I had an expert, MD, PhD, however many letters behind his name, who has been in front of Congress many, many times and done a lot for the pain community, drop a Senate bill in my lap a few days ago and say, there you go, Susan, here's your second Senate bill. To which I said, I'm 65 now, I think not. And he thinks so. So here we go again. And we need you. We need representatives from the DEA, FBI. We need this side enforcement, narcotics enforcement. Those that are attempting to stop this horrible narcotic problem that we have. And then we need the people on this side who are the medical community, the patients, even AMA, who is trying to also help this dilemma, patients, and even our veterinarians, unfortunately. And these two factions are butting heads, because right in the middle, we have the fallacy being that anyone that might take an opioid from the pharmacy is going to automatically become addicted, which research has told us currently is an absolute lie. But somehow it has become commonly thought to be truth. I've recently, upon my great research with all these national and international experts, found that what I thought was originally 2.5% of patients that will become addicted to their medications, that they're very necessary to live when they can't get out of bed, they can't function, they can't drive, can't talk, sleep, whatever, because their pain is so great, or their other alternative is to just not live anymore. The actual rate is less than 1%, but that's not what our community thinks. That's not what our state thinks. That's not what our country thinks. There's a fallacy. So we've got these people over here. We've got drug enforcement, and we've got the medical community trying to help actual pain patients, like my 92-year-old father who I lost, who was in severe pain and couldn't get any help until I took him home with hospice. And that's when he finally had some, quality of life. So instead of these two factions headbutting, this piece of legislation that I'm about to introduce, which I think is wonderful, would solve the problem because it would take all these agencies that are trying to get in between the patient and the doctor and make them step back from overreach, power overreach, and maintain their own positions and their own directives rather than getting into the doctor's way or being a part of a directive that they're no part of. Even our pharmacies, they're telling their customers, I'm sorry, I can't give you that medication because somebody told me I can't. That's not even normal. So what I'm asking of all of you is if you would assist us on August 27th by sending us DEA, CDC from this area, FBI. I even try to get hold of my cousin Nicole. And there's somebody that obviously does not want me to do this because my equipment keeps getting hacked. And so I'm having a very hard time getting people to this function. If you could please help get the necessary people to this function to take a look at this piece of legislation, tweak it, change it, whatever we need to do for our city, for our county, for our state. Decide, is this what we need to do? Is this what we want to do for Ohio as well as our city? Put it together, get it to the Senate floor and take off with it or not. And this is what I'm asking you to assist me with. Will you do that?
Where is this function?
It's here at the Conneaut Legion, August 27th, 1 o'clock in the new meeting hall. The newly created meeting hall, you first walk in and you go turn right.
What
And
time?
at 1 o'clock. So 1 to about either 3:30 or 4. And I have very high-end speakers, hoping to zoom them in, but believe it or not, I mean, I came back here from Columbus and you have like 100 audio, visual and IT people you can choose from. After going through 5 different companies in a couple months, I can't find one to help this meeting, to get this meeting, what do you call it? To run this meeting for me. So I'm really stressing. So if you know anybody that can actually help me get this meeting run, I would appreciate that too. I need you guys to help, not just on the local level here to get patients who are attempting to kill themselves. One who just recently lit herself on fire, second suicide attempt, veteran. But anybody else who may be attempting tomorrow, the next day, week from now, we have to stop this. There are legitimate pain patients and there are addicts, but they're not the same thing. And they need help. And I need help.
Well, we'll put the word out and we'll see what we can do.
Okay.
And have you contacted the phone company about your IT?
I've contacted several internet security technicians, and they say that I'm accessed. I have a keylogger who, I guess somebody just doesn't want me to do what I'm
How about the
doing.
local phone company to help you set your meeting up?
Oh, local phone company. Oh,
Yeah. Conneaut's
that's an idea.
Great Wave Communications. They're on State Street.
Yes. I'll do that.
They might be able to help you get things set up for the internet.
Oh, thank you.
Okay.
I appreciate that.
All right. Thank you for your
Sure.
comments.
Okay. Thank you very much. Do you know how to get a hold of me? If anybody has-
You put your number down, right?
Oh, yes, I'm sorry. Yes, I did.
Okay.
Thank you very much. I
Thank
appreciate
you.
it.
It goes into the log.
Any other citizen comments? Okay, moving on to communications.
I have none this evening.
Does council have any communications? Okay, hearing none, we'll move on to reports of the administration, beginning with the city manager, Mr. Hockaday.
Thank you, Council President Arcaro. First, I'm going to start off with, went to the leadership annual meeting. It's my pleasure to see Judge Nick Irochi awarded the Marta Stone Lifetime Achievement Award for Leadership. great honor. I know there have been other good citizens of Conneaut, like Bert Drennan, that have received it in the past. So I think it's a great award, and congratulations to Judge Irochi on that. He has been very selfless in his 20-some years of volunteering for that organization on their Public Safety and Justice Day. So I was happy to see him receive that. So thought it deserves some acknowledgement. We did a pre-construction on the commercial demolitions that we have slated coming up here. We also did a pre-con on the residential demolitions. My best guess anticipation, because we're still waiting on the residential, a few of the properties have to have some asbestos remediation prior to demolition. Is my guess is the first group of 5 or so will hit demolition right around September 1st. So
Did you say September?
September 1st, yes.
Okay, thank you.
And I'm hoping around a similar time on the 970 Harbor structure, hopefully earlier. But we have a few items in the building that need to be removed. So once we find a new location for that, we'll be able to move forward with that demolition as well. The Conneaut Creek Dredge Material Facility is out to bid. There's a pre-bid meeting here August 10th, 10 a.m. In this very room. So this week, we will likely have a second pre-bid meeting that will be on site for those contractors. Obviously, it's a controlled site. So, we're working our way through that. Hopefully, we'll be getting those bids back right around the end of this month as well. So that's moving forward. We had a pre-construction on our 2022 paving and the Dorman Road chip seal. They got the base course and the top course of the chip seal on Dorman Road completed on Friday. The static building remediation, this one's going to be appearing on here for the foreseeable future until that project is completed. As you know, tonight you have the RFQ, which is basically just a request for qualifications for environmental engineering firms. Generally, CT Consultant serves as our engineer for most municipal projects. However, they do not do environmental engineering. So we have to take that out and procure those services. So that's what's before council to consider. This is just the advertisement. We'll publish the advertisement. We'll get whatever respondents come back in, and we'll score them and select, and then we'll move forward with the actual remediation project scope after that. We did receive the signed grant agreement between the it's technically Growth Partnership was the lead agency, but it's the Ashfield County Brownfield Coalition that submitted the application. It's in Growth Partnership's name. We're in the process of devising a sub-grant recipient agreement with Growth Partnership for utilization of those funds. Once we complete that, that will come before council as well. We did receive clarification. The company that performed our phase 2 on the site, Manikin Smith out of Columbus, they are eligible to submit and serve in that capacity. We had requested clarification on that because they had to co-sign our application and attest to the phase 2 results that we submitted as part of that application. So we did get that acknowledgement from the state. Our water treatment filtration improvements. So after we did our council tour, and I thought it was great that we got to do that. So we have a little stronger understanding of some of the project going on down there. 1 and 2 filter beds were completed and were tested. During the testing of filter bed 3, the sub-filter failed, which means they have to remove it. Now, the good news is we have another filter sitting right there that we can install. The entire plastic under drain system has to be removed from that because it failed the pressure test. So it will come out. They'll take filter 4, put it in filter bed 3 and repressure test that. We're waiting on Xylem, the manufacturer, to get back to us on a lead time for the replacement of that filter. I'm hoping it is not as long as the other one, because as you remember, we were supposed to originally receive it December and then April, and then it turned in June. Hopefully it doesn't take that long, but I did want to make you aware of that. Make this already lengthy project drag on a little further. But I will let you know once I receive those updates from the manufacturer. But this is why we test it, because if it does fail, obviously we don't want to accept it. So the ODOT project, it's continuing. I think we're talking about this before the meeting. The surface course on the west side from the plaza all the way to the Kingsville line has been completed. The center lanes and the westbound lane are yet to be completed. Beyond that, there is a ton of small work, including all their fine work around aprons, all the aprons on all the roads to be completed. There's some restoration work on driveways, curb ramps, et cetera, that need to be completed. There's a punch list of items that need to be corrected for things that aren't completed. They need to finish their manhole casting adjustments throughout the entirety of the project. They're only to about Chestnut Street on that. So there's a sizable volume of work that remains to be completed. I wouldn't anticipate seeing the paving crew again until possibly Wednesday. Obviously, we're getting a ton of rain right now. So tomorrow's probably out of the question for paving. So it'd likely be Wednesday at the earliest that we would see them come back. So that project continues to move forward. Route 20 sewer line projects, I think you've seen them out there. They're finishing some of the top hat installs. I shared an email with council from Mascaro, the company completing the work for Norfolk and Southern on their bridge replacement over Conneaut Creek. They were issuing a notice that they are going to start doing the bases and the pilings. Obviously, that is going to be some heavy construction, so we can anticipate while they're driving pilings and doing things like that, that is going to create some noise. They did notify some of the adjacent property owners that would be immediately affected. But I did want to let folks know that there is going to be some additional construction work, and they are prepped to start setting those bases. I think that is about it, unless I missed something. Happy to answer any other questions council may have.
Mr. Hockley, do we have a timeline to completion on the Route 20 West overlay?
I mean, yeah, into August is what they're approximately what they're saying, but there's quite a bit of work left.
And then manhole restoration again will be after that.
They're doing it now.
Okay.
And I did note that they found a couple problems there. I think it's the ones that they have the cones sitting over. Typically they don't sit like that. Those are manholes not belonging to the city. They belong to the telephone company. And it's a manhole welded to a giant steel plate that sits on top of their conduit boxes that are underneath the road. And the way this technology works is it's intended to work around wastewater masonry. So they come down and they bring basically a giant oversized hole saw that fits on the front of a skid steer, and they take a coring and they take all the way to the top of the manhole casting off. They relay some brick inside of it, and then they seal it with concrete all the way back up to the road level so it won't leak, it doesn't infiltrate, and you don't have a chance of nicking them with the plow, and it's perfectly level with roadway. The problem is because the castings for the telephone company are welded down, they can't adjust the height of them. So ODOT is trying to come up with a workaround on those couple manhole castings where they can't do a typical adjustment. So I know Mr. Zapatelli from the telephone company has been included in those discussions with ODOT as to how they want that modified and what they're going to do with them.
Is this the same company that's paving the streets that are taking care of the top hats, or?
Yes, yeah, Burton Scott is the subcontractor for Marucci and Gaffney.
For the manhole?
Yeah.
Casting restoration. And then how far, so we've gone, so the final course has been laid
Partially
from where to where?
from the viaduct bridge in the downtown
Okay.
all the way to the plaza. The final wearing course is down, and then the south side, the eastbound lane of Route 20 is finished all the way to Kingsville. So typically they're pushing about the paver box is about 14 to 16 foot wide. It's adjustable. And so they'll make that probably in 2 more passes. But understand they're going over a mile with each pass,
Right.
so.
I mean, that's a
Couple miles of
considerable
paving.
distance.
Yeah.
And so I know we've had, I don't know if other council members had questions from residents, but so everybody is aware. So right at about the plaza, it's going to go from the 2-lane center lane, turn lane.
It'll
into four-
convert,
Into 4
it'll
lanes.
convert back because we didn't swap out the signals.
Okay, so, and that has to do with the traffic signals,
Sure.
signalization.
Yeah,
and all
yeah,
those things.
yeah. But it'll be 3-lane all the way to the plaza, so.
And then around the curve, Dairy Queen
3.
going west, that'll be
3-lane. Yeah.
2-lane.
You
and
2-lane
center
at Dairy Queen, yeah,
2-lane and then
turn
in the
lane.
2-lane, turn lane. center lane.
I do have a couple more questions. I've been getting calls about Chestnut Street just north of the Conrail tracks. When will that be patched up? I said I'll
I,
bring it
I
up.
know the contractor was out there, and I don't have a final answer for you on that because I'll have to check with Brian.
I know there was comments made to me about there was patchwork done in the harbor. And did the city do that? I said, I don't know. And,
Yeah, yes, we did. So,
They do it?
but they're not the same. Okay, so that's related to, we were inspecting that there was, and that was performed by Severino Construction. So it's within the warranty period. So Severino Construction came back out, they dug back down to it. There's water infiltrating that joint. The real question is, whether that's coming from a water main or where the source of the water was coming from. So there's a little bit of a debate, and that debate determines who pays. So the reason behind the question with Chestnut Street versus when other things get done is one's related to a contract and one is not. There were some things that definitely need to be repaired that I believe the contractor is going to be responsible for. But we have this ongoing issue in that intersection that we are getting water from somewhere. And we don't know where it's coming from. So we don't believe it's a broken water main. We don't believe it's a service line
talking about on Chestnut Street.
on Chestnut Street, sir.
That's why you guys are holding off on patching.
Well, yes, because
Okay.
there's still some debate about one, did our fix work?
Yeah, I
we-
can give
we-
an answer
Yeah.
to that.
So there's a broader debate that's happening over that, and
We don't want to patch that until we know for
so
sure.
we know for sure because it's been a problem twice now.
Okay, and also down on Detroit Street, that storm culvert
Yes.
there down there, just east of Chestnut Street. Any idea when that'll be addressed?
I don't have a definitive date for you.
I know we were
but I-
talking
I-
May.
Yeah, I know.
And the residents, are, they would like to be
Right.
just made of.
Well, and I what I may do is I may ask for one of the other departments to come out and assist with it, just because I know what position the Public Works Department is in right now.
I know they're
We're
getting
down
worried because the rain season's coming up and,
Yeah.
and they'll be knocking on your door.
Yeah, I understand, and we'll get to them. So
Okay. That's all I have for now.
Are you referring to the northeast corner
Um,
at Chestnut and Detroit?
it's 3 houses down from the east of the corner
Oh, so that's,
on Detroit Street,
okay.
going east of Chestnut.
Oh, okay. That's something different then.
There was, apparently there was a drain there, and years back, I guess the city come down and plugged it up. And then all of a sudden they're having water backing up into their yard, and it's been backing up into their driveway, and they're worried about it killing their trees. I mean, I've been down there and looked at it, and they had standing water for a couple days after heavy rains, and springtime is pretty bad. And we talked about this before, and I know you were supposed to get a culvert ordered. We're going to address it in May, then June, and things happened, and they
Yeah.
called me, and they just been very patient about it.
Mhm.
So I told them, I would bring it up again.
yeah, and we have about 6 significant stormwater projects that we need to complete. I think we've gotten through 2 of them between the other things that we've jumped around to.
Okay.
Okay, anybody else for questions? Okay, thank you. Moving on to Finance Director, Mr. Williams.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. I provided council with our financial information form. This is a requirement that we file on an annual basis to the Ohio Water Development Authority. Basically, what they're trying to do is determine the solvency, the financial solvency of the enterprise funds, the water and sewer, and as well as to address whether the rates are sufficient to support operations and debt service. It's a pretty condensed form, but what we're looking at is a surplus from the prior year. For the water, was about 1.1 million carryover and about 1.9, almost 2 million for the sewer fund. The reporting year gross, they're pretty similar. Mr. Hockaday and I were just talking about this today. They're darn close. I mean, 2.38 million for the water and 2.344 million for the sewer fund. The operations and maintenance of both of those departments are pretty close, 2.1 million for water, 2.05 million for the sewer fund. The big difference between the two is the annual debt service. About 10 cents of every dollar goes to retire debt in the water fund versus about 22 cents for the sewer. So the annual debt service in the water fund is about 203,000, 506,000 for the sewer. Total expenses were including debt, 2.3 million for the water and about 2.5 million for the sewer. So what they're looking at is the net revenue. So that 1.1 million that was available as of 12/31/2020, you're adding that 78,000. So that's a net revenue that we're adding to that fund balance. So at the end of 2021, we're looking at 1.18 million carryover in the water. The sewer is a little bit different. We actually used 216,000. So the net revenue is in a deficit situation, not a deficit fund balance, but the net revenue, the expenses exceed revenue by 216,000. So basically what we did is we used fund balance to support operations and pay for debt. So once OWDA sees that, they'll monitor that on an annual basis to make sure that you have sufficient rates to cover it. And I'll get down to that a little bit later. The total number of customers, we have about 48, almost 4,900 water customers versus 4,021 sewer customers. The revenue from residential customers is about 70% versus 66% for sewer. And a new item that they've added to this form is the average monthly bill. Now, this isn't the median where half is below and half is above. It's the average of all. So the average residential monthly bill for water is $30.72 versus sewer, which is $34.99. And then we get down to the date of the last rate increase. Now, this is for as of 2021, because we did raise sewer rates in 2022 by on average about 2%. But the last time sewer rates were raised for this form, it was 2% in 2017. So it's been almost 5 years, but you can see the need for why we need to at least incrementally increase sewer rates on an annual basis just to keep up with operations. Yes, there's a significant fund balance, but they have significant capital requirements and significant debt service. So we really need to stay on top of that and watch that. But if you have any questions about this, I'd be happy to answer them at this time.
This form is for what purpose again?
It's for the Ohio Water Development Authority, and they're trying to assess the financial solvency of your enterprise funds, as well as to determine whether you have adequate water and sewer rates to support operations and debt service.
OWDA is basically our bank for our utilities. And they do this just to check our overall wellness, but they also want to make sure that you're increasing rates. So if they see really low rates and you're asking for financing, for those, and you may not be in the strongest financial position, there are times where you can actually lose preferential lending rates because you're not raising rates, believe it or not. Typically, we have qualified as a hardship community, which often means we can get a low or sometimes no interest loan through OWDA. I believe the most current water filtration plant upgrades are a 0% interest loan. One of the things that goes into that is they go back through a 5-year history and look and see if we've raised rates, and we have raised rates. And it's of not enough consequence. So to offset, kind of the financial deficit the facility sits in compared to its capital needs. So you can often qualify for 0% interest loan, which is ideal, right? You're only paying back the money you borrowed and nothing more. So it is important. And I appreciate John sharing this and kind of showing that. And only John and I are the nerds in the building to remark that we're within, $30,000 between the two funds and total revenue. That's kind of a wild happenstance, but it's kind of interesting to see them laid out side by side.
So this is just shown to the state that we do qualify for this, showing the revenue that we're.
It's mandatory reporting. We're qualified, and we figured we'd share it with council so you can see it as well.
Very good.
John, so this 216 deficit.
The net revenue is a deficit, not the actual fund balance. So at the end of 2021, the balance, even though the sewer fund, we used 216,000 in fund balance, we still ended the year with 1.7 million in fund carryover, which is a very healthy carryover for this fund. But now next year when we do 2022, if they see another negative net revenue, they're going to start to question the adequacy of the rates that we've implemented.
Okay, so our last rate hike,
Was
we just,
we just did it.
right.
This
And that
form
was
is
at what-
as of 2021, so I can't report the 2022
Right,
rate.
and that percentage was what in,
Around 2, little, it depended because, the sewer rate is a little bit different with sewer debt
Mhm.
service, operations and maintenance, and then the administration versus the water is a little more straightforward. But on average, it depending on where you were at, it was probably between 2 and 2.25% for most users.
okay. Thanks.
You're welcome.
Any other questions for the finance director? Okay, move on to the law director, Mr. Lewis.
Thank you, Mr. Arcaro. I have nothing new to report this evening. Should have a written, will have a written report to council before the next meeting. And in case everyone's wondering what's going on in the hallway, there's some firemen out there attending to one of our guests.
Oh,
That's what the noise is out there.
Okay,
Oh,
thanks.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, moving on to committee reports.
I have just an announcement to make from the school board that we're going to have a meeting with them on September 16th, 6 PM in the library at the high school.
September 16th at 6 p.
Yes. I'm sorry, September 14th.
14th?
Yes,
9/14 at 6 p.m.
yes,
at the school board or at the-
CHS.
CHS. Library at the high school.
Mr. Emery, did they have any initial items that
She didn't
Sure.
communicate that to me.
I'll reach out to the superintendent?
All right.
Okay, liaison reports.
I just have 2 meeting announcements to make. There'll be a Conneaut Tourism Board meeting tomorrow, Tuesday, August 9th at 6 PM at the Port Office on Broad Street. And then there will be a Cable Advisory Board meeting Wednesday, August 10th, noon at the Conneaut Library. Thank you.
Anybody else for a liaison report? Okay, move on to our ordinances for this evening. And we have 6 to consider in first reading. And we will begin with 6622.
An ordinance to appoint James Colco to the Cable Advisory Board to fill an unexpired term ending December 31, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Hey, Mr. Hockaday, you want to add anything?
This is to fill the unexpired term of Mr. Matt Crawford. Due to some personal circumstances, elected to resign his position. I'm not sure of his effective date of his. I didn't actually see his resignation letter. Councilwoman Ledford, do you know what his,
I thought it was immediately.
okay, was his last meeting, this past meeting?
Yeah, I believe so.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay, any questions or comments regarding this ordinance?
So do we want to pursue this as an emergency or?
Yeah, it'll just have 30 days of effectiveness. So he wouldn't be able to attend his first meeting until September 8th.
I think we should go ahead and do it then. That's an emergency. So that he can
Because
just
it
slide
wouldn't
into
immediately see the
his,
resignation.
yeah,
Yeah, that's fine.
okay,
Are you sponsoring?
sure.
Go ahead.
Okay. I'd like to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 66-22.
Motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 6622. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski? Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Ledford, 3 reading rule has been suspended.
this time I'd like to declare ordinance 66-22 an emergency.
Motion to declare ordinance 6622 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Ledford, the emergency's been declared.
this time I'd like to act on ordinance 66-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 6622. Is there a second?
I'll second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, ordinance 6622 is passed. Move on to ordinance 6722.
A resolution providing for the submission to the electors of the city of Kanya a 4.75 mil replacement levy in excess of the 10 mil limitation for a 5-year period commencing with tax year 2023 to be collected in 2024 at the general election to be held November 8th, 2022 for street construction, maintenance, repair, and improvements, including but not limited to general construction, reconstruction, resurfacing, repairs of streets, roads, and bridges in the city.
Okay, as you know, we discussed this at length at numerous work sessions and have decided upon a 2 mil increase. The current is 2.75. So this will be a 2 mil increase. Are there any questions or further comment on this? Is there a motion to proceed?
Mr. Carroll, I'd like to make a motion to waive the 3 reading rule on resolution 67-22.
So motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on resolution 6722. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Moiseo, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to act on resolution 6722.
There's a motion to act on resolution 6722. Is there a second?
second,
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
yes,
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes.
Okay, resolution 6722 is passed. Move on to ordinance 6822.
An ordinance to reappoint Beth Church and Diana McKenna to the Board of Tax Review for a period of 2 years effective September 1, 2022 and ending August 31, 2024, and declaring an emergency.
Mr. Hockaday, you want to add anything?
This is the least prestigious board in the city of Conneaut. And I deeply, deeply thank Beth Church and Diane McKenna for sitting on this. So they do hear tax appeals, and they also they also hear some other appeals from some various other programs, but primarily tax appeals. There is a third member of this board. Ms. Babs Legeza, she is the city manager's appointment. There's a public appointment and then a council appointment. So you have the public and the council appointment, reappointment here. And they've graciously served in this role for, I believe, 3 terms each. So I appreciate their continued service to the city of Conneaut. It's not a fun board, but I'm glad they do what they do.
Yes, definitely appreciate their service.
Absolutely.
Any questions or comments? This one is not ambiguous as the other one was, so it is an emergency with the September 1st. So is there a motion to proceed?
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule for ordinance 68-22.
There's a motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 6822. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes,
Okay, Mr. Prokowski, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to declare emergency for ordinance 68-22.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 6822 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes,
Hey, Mr. Prokowski, the emergency has been declared.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 68-22.
There's a motion to act on ordinance 6822. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
Yes,
Okay, ordinance 6822 is passed. Move on to ordinance 6922.
An ordinance to authorize the city manager to enter into a housing revolving loan fund administration agreement with the Ohio Department of Development and declaring an emergency.
Okay, Mr. Hockaday.
This is not one you see all the time. And what this has to do with is CDBG Chip and Home Program. So we partner with Ashfield County, as you may recall, for the Community Housing Improvement Program and their home program, where a senior may qualify to have a furnace repaired in their home or a sewer line repaired. It's all income driven, and it's usually first come, first serve. That results in a lien being placed on the house. So if they turn around, try and sell the house for a profit, that would come back to the city. And that those revenues are then held and may be redeployed. So this covers both the initial program and also the revolving loan fund, which we still hold. We are required to reauthorize it, I believe, every 2 years. So we don't see this one all the time, and it's up for reauthorization. It does require council approval for me to re-sign for it. So that's all this is CDBG Chip and Home.
Any questions or comments regarding this ordinance? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 69-22.
There's a motion to suspend a 3 reading rule on ordinance 6922. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
yes,
Okay, Mrs. Ledford, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
This time I'd like to declare ordinance 69-22 an emergency.
There's a motion to declare ordinance 6922 an emergency. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff?
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski?
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford?
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo?
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski?
yes,
Okay, Mrs. Ledford, the emergency has been declared.
This time I'd like to act on ordinance 69-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 6922. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro?
Yes.
Mr. Emery?
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 6922 is passed. Move on to ordinance 7022.
An ordinance to amend the 2022 budget through appropriations and fund and interfund transfers attached Tier 2 and marked Exhibit A.
Okay, Mr. Williams.
We have a variety of line items that are being adjusted here. Most of them are fuel related. In the police department, we're adding an additional $10,000 to fuel. We just added 10,000 a few months ago. Their towing charges need to be adjusted by 2,000. And I'm creating a new line item and appropriating $1,500 in that line item for postage and copy machine. It's something that's been taken out of incidentals, and it really needs its own line item, as do other departments, so we can track it a little bit better. So the total general fund is $13,500 in appropriation increases. In the street department, it was very hard to work around this because we only have certified revenue of about $7,100 in the public works department for the street department. And so I had to reduce engineering services and contractual services by 2,000 each, add 3,000 to fuel, which is not going to be enough for the remainder of the year. Council at some point may have to transfer additional funds from the general fund in order to support the street department, but they are woefully low in fuel for this year. Right now, I think we appropriated additional 20,000 a few months ago, and it's pretty much depleted. They're down to about 8,000. They're probably going to need at least another 30 by the end of the year if gas prices remain at this level. And then the planning and zoning department asked for an increase in mowing charges of 8,000. The new contract that was signed was about double the price. I know fuel costs have gone up, so we need to add some additional money there. So we have 11,000 in increases, 4,000 in decreases for a street department total net of $7,000. And then for the cemetery department, same thing. We need to add an additional 3,000 in fuel, and then the parks department, 4,000. So the grand total is $27,500 in across all the funds.
Okay, any questions or comments regarding this? Is there a motion to proceed?
Make a motion, Mr. Arcaro, to waive the 3 reading rule on ordinance 70-22.
This motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 7022. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery.
Yes.
Mr. Goff.
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford.
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, Mr. Moiseo, the 3 reading rule has been suspended.
I'd like to make a motion to act on ordinance 70-22.
This motion to act on ordinance 7022. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery.
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski.
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, ordinance 7022 is passed. Move on to ordinance 7122.
An ordinance creating Fund 2651 Ohio for the purpose of accounting for the receipts and disbursements related to the One Ohio Memorandum of Understanding for opioid litigation.
Hey, Mr. Williams.
This is just a new fund we're required to create. It is a restricted revenue source. It can only be used for certain purposes. So it does require a separate fund to account for those receipts and disbursements.
Any questions or comments regarding this ordinance? Is there a motion?
I'll make a motion to suspend the 3 reading rule on ordinance 71-22.
Motion to suspend the 3 read rule on ordinance 7122. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Hey, Mrs. Ledford, three reading rules been suspended.
This time I'd like to act on ordinance 71-22.
Motion to act on ordinance 7122. Is there a second?
Second.
Mr. Arcaro,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yes.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Ledford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, ordinance 7122 is passed. Move on to unfinished and old business. Mr. Hockaday, if you could briefly let the public know what's going on at PW with the two serious incidents last week.
Sure. We had one incident involving a operator of a mower. They had a rollover accident on the Broad Street underpass. They're fairly seriously injured. They are back home. They will require probably some additional medical care. And I don't anticipate seeing that employee back for an extended period of time. The mower was not damaged. Had some minor issues, but they were thankfully, the ROPS bar was up and they were wearing their seatbelt at the time of the incident. And it probably saved a far more tragic outcome. The second was our roadside mower was operating along Lake Road. The operator had exited his vehicle to move an obstruction, and motor vehicle behind him ran into the parked vehicle that was all the way over at the curb side at some speed at approximately 40 miles an hour. The driver had some minor injuries related to probably the shock deployment of the airbags and so on and so forth. But that roadside mower is probably out of service for an extended period of time. It did snap the rear axle on that mower. Obviously, we've had the safety talk, but it's also important to have the safety talk with the public as well, with our crews out there working on roads. And we certainly know that we have a number of different projects out in public roadways at this time. All of these men and women that work for the city, they all have families, and it's not a good phone call to make. And it's not one that I want to make. So, just be cautious, move over, pay attention in work zones, be careful around our folks. We want everybody to go home at the end of the day.
Okay, thank you. We hope send get well wishes to our employee. Anybody else for unfinished and old business?
I have a couple of things, Mr. Arcaro. Number one, I want to say thank you to the citizens of Conneaut, city administration, the police, fire, public works departments, everybody involved in the bridge dedication we had this past weekend. American Legion, Call Post 151, Veterans of Foreign Wars 2683, all the individuals involved with those organizations assisting with this, our Department of Transportation, and all the other persons who, Mr. Milton Moose, who provided the flags, Don Colley, who provided the music, Nick Church, everybody that was involved in this, we sent out a big thank you for all their efforts. Jim Jones was a big part of this and providing the tent from the Optimist Club. I think it went very well. And everybody's participation and involvement is very much appreciated by the families. Also, I wanted to thank Mr. Brian Bidwell for the tour we had at our work session last Monday. It enlightened me on the sewer operations and how everything that's involved. He's kind of like a mini biologist. I mean, it's amazing. And it would be nice if we were able to have citizens be able to tour that and understand how it works, what's involved, and as we're talking about potential cost, what it costs to keep something like this operating and running. So there's so many so many things that happen.
They do that. They do public tours. Absolutely.
Do they?
Brian,
Okay,
Brian is
great.
always
I
happy
mean,
to do the tour.
I'm glad I
He
brought it
does,
up because
he does the tours for leadership. I know he does the
Excellent.
tours. They take some of the either middle school or high school science classes through there. So they do a lot of public
so
tours.
that apply for water.
What's that?
Does water do tours?
Yes, we do tours of both.
Right, because that was very interesting too, and with Skip and Rich, and just learning how everything works and how knowledgeable and dedicated these employees are to their jobs and those positions. It's truly amazing.
Well, they're more than excited to talk about what they do.
I'm well aware of that. But we appreciate that, but I'm well aware of that, yes. So, again, thank you.
Anybody else for unfinished and old business? We move on to miscellaneous business.
Regarding the gas station at Lake and Broad last week. I've had a couple more calls regarding that. So if you can have the zoning department check into that, evidently they're operating some type of repair business out of there.
And they are aware of it. And I know they have made some kind of contact attempts previously. I'll have to check the status and I'll give you one after the meeting.
Very good. Because I just had a call. They said the other night they were working there
Mhm.
during the night on cars. So thank you.
Anybody else miscellaneous business?
I want to address my comments that I made the last council. And I received some emails, definitely stepped on some toes and hurt some feelings down there. I was contemplating on reading part of the letter that had me upset, but I'm not going to. I think if anybody wants to contact me, they can look at the letter themselves and I'll show it to them. And that's what made me say what I said. I did hurt some feelings down there. In fact, it was communicated to me that I'm extremely ignorant. And I am ignorant to being on council because this is new to me. But I also know what I see and what I feel. And that's where my comments come from. And I want people to understand that. I appreciate the defense that come to me, but nobody needs to defend me. I made these on my own. There's no third-party entities influencing me on this, as that's been implied. This was all me. And I stand by my words. And I do feel bad that the youngest member of the Port Authority, I know personally, and he is a good individual, and I feel he's a good fit down there. I just feel he's young, he can learn down there, and I feel that reading this letter, I worry about the directions that he's getting by the others. It just surprises me that there's probably over 100 years of CEO experience among these people, and I'll just leave it at that. I don't want to dig this up anymore, but I just want to explain where my comments were coming from and how my perception of this letter was. So I'll leave it at that. And I stand by my words with no apologies. That's it.
Okay. Anybody else for miscellaneous business? Okay, I just have one thing. For our next work session, we'll be at PW. You could let Mr. DeBelle know.
I will.
And if there's no other miscellaneous business, is there a motion to adjourn?
I'll make a motion, Mr. Carroll.
Mr. Carroll,
Yes.
Mr. Emery,
Yes.
Mr. Goff,
Yeah.
Mr. Kozowski,
Yes.
Mrs. Lightford,
Yes.
Mr. Moiseo,
Yes.
Mr. Prokowski.
Yes.
Okay, City Council for August 8th, 2022 is adjourned. Thank you.